Now let's go to our top story, because Donald Trump has gone to war with the BBC as the White House has accused the corporation of purposeful dishonesty and 100% fake news.
Washington launched its attack over the way a Panorama documentary selectively edited a speech made by the president.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
Well, Caroline Levitt, Donald Trump's press secretary, hit out saying that British taxpayers are being forced to fund a leftist propaganda machine.
Well, with us now is former BBC executive and presenter Roger Bolton. Now, Roger, the best defence I've heard from the BBC is that this was a mistake. Can you really argue it was a mistake? What happened? They fell accidentally into the editing studio?
I can't tell you. It was wrong that it should have been edited in that way. But let's start where we are. What the facts are. You shouldn't believe the White House. It lies. Trump lies. And the fact is that Congress, both the House of Representatives and the Senate, voted to condemn and to impeach Donald Trump by the Senate by 57 votes to 43 because of trying to stage a coup, a self-coup, as they called it. These are the facts. Now, and also, by the way, 7 Republicans voted for that as well. He is now trying to rewrite history. He encouraged people to go to Washington. He used language consistently just short of the line, told to fight and so on. And what did he do the moment he got back into power? He pardoned over 1,000 people who'd been convicted of a variety of very serious offences. He was trying to deny the democratic decision of the American people who voted for Joe Biden. And subsequently...
Remarkable that you've said... Roger, it's remarkable that you've accused Donald Trump of rewriting history when we've just played a clip of the BBC selectively editing a speech quite literally to redisplay and to twist falsely what he said.
It's quite possible to say both things. It's quite possible to say both things. Trump said of the Democratic election in the States, it was a big steal. Nobody in the courts and anywhere else have supported that. His own vice president agreed that it was a fair election and signed it into law. What is happening is Trump is trying to rewrite history. Now, let's look at the question of the Panorama. The overall programme was fair. That editing was not fair and should not have been done. But by looking at a small example like that, you miss the bigger picture of what Trump was up to. And there is a propaganda campaign going on here against the BBC for a variety of reasons. The BBC has made a mistake. It should come out. It's wrong of it not to come out and explain the circumstances. But to use one small example to suggest that the whole organisation is biased, and for you to take seriously the White House talking this being 100% propaganda when their record in relation to the truth is, well, shall we say, strange.
Sorry, Roger, can we just stop you there? The idea that this is just one small example of BBC bias, this is not the only controversy that the BBC has found itself caught up in. A few months ago, there was a film about the war in Gaza, which was narrated by the son of a Hamas minister. The BBC has admitted it was wrong over that. It's not just one example. It's a whole series of quite serious examples of BBC unbiased, isn't it?
There are serious issues, but you've got to understand the fundamental problem here is we have a very divided country and everything is polarised. And people are locked into their silos and they only see what they want to hear. If you look at the Middle East situation, Danny Cohen, who's the former director of television at the BBC, runs a propaganda organisation effectively supporting the Netanyahu government. No problem
Roger,
about
Danny
that.
Cohen is in here and he would absolutely very strenuously deny that. I want to just challenge what you said before, though. You spoke about... Roger, you spoke about people being in silos. Roger, you can't just start attacking someone who's not here with a serious allegation. You are. Let me come in. Roger, you spoke about people being in silos. The whole point of a national, a public service broadcaster, as it tries to go beyond those. It tries to, report accurately and fairly. They're putting people more further into silos by willfully misleading the audience, as is the allegation against the BBC. The BBC should be above those silos, but actually, contrary to your position, it's making it worse.
No, I agree with you. It should be. By the damn code, it's just a factual point. It runs a media monitoring organisation, and just check it out. There's nothing wrong with that, but it should be known that that's what he does. Like others, run others. What I'm trying to make the point is everything's polarised. People are attacking the BBC because largely they want their position to dominate. It's like being in the middle of the road and being hit by traffic going both ways. Now, in these circumstances, it's crucial the BBC doesn't make mistakes. And it has made mistakes. But get them in proportion and recognize what's going on here. There's a propaganda war going over in the Middle East. There's a propaganda war going on with the White House. The White House is trying to rewrite history about what Donald Trump did.
But the BBC is literally rewriting history. That's the evidence we've demonstrated. That's what the Telegraph has shown. The BBC itself is rewriting history. Is this not an example, Roger, of the BBC conducting its own propaganda campaign, as you put it?
No, it's BBC making mistakes it shouldn't make. But for you to generalise, as a journalist, from you to generalise from one example to say the whole thing is biased is not.
Just one example.
You've got to have a more substantial basis.
I think we've listed a couple of other examples. Just very quickly.
Right. But look at the number of examples of Trump lying.
I don't think two wrongs make a right here, even if you accept the idea, which we don't necessarily, that Donald Trump is lying. Just very, very quickly before we go, I mean, this is a huge mistake. And as you say, the BBC has not apologised. We've had a very tepid statement, which we'll read out in a moment, saying that the BBC will take on feedback. Surely they have to do more than that. Surely someone at the top needs to go. Is this the end of Tim Davie?
I don't think so, though. Is it near the end? I mean, look, we're about to enter charter renewal. The other background to this is the future of the BBC is at stake. It's chartered to operate, the licence fee. A number of people want to hit the BBC hard and get it out of the way because it stops their commercial interests. In these circumstances, the BBC mustn't make mistakes. It's made mistakes. But get them into proportion. It shouldn't be the end of Tim Davie. It shouldn't be the end of the BBC. Please be a little more sceptical about Donald Trump and his White House propaganda and go and talk to those Republicans who voted in favour of the motion which said he cheated in the election, which he did.
Former BBC executive, presenter Roger Bolton, thank you very much for your time this morning. A BBC spokesperson has told GB News, well, we don't comment on leaked documents. When the BBC receives feedback, it takes it seriously and considers it carefully. Olivia, look, Donald Trump has faced many allegations, obviously, of lying, of misleading people, and, of course, of that so-called coup in January of 2021. But we expect journalists to not do the same thing, right? Absolutely. And as we were saying there, two wrongs don't make a right. Whatever Donald Trump did, that sounds like a little bit of whataboutery as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, it wasn't just that strong line coming from Caroline Levitt. She also said that when she comes to the United Kingdom, she's in hotel rooms forced to watch the BBC and it upsets her day. We should tell her GB News isn't too far away. Yes, exactly.
Not to mention she's probably staying many times in Turnberry Hotel, so she could have a chat with her boss to change the station and put on GB in the background. But no, I mean it's a big deal, and especially if you look at the way it was, edited. The actual statements. I think there was something like 54 minutes apart, and they didn't make it clear that they were just doing a montage. But at the end of the day, President Trump is going to be okay with all of this. But the people who should really be upset about this are the British people who have looked to the BBC, the state broadcaster, for their news. And I remember during that time, because it was the lead up to the US election, so just before, just a little over a year ago this time, and people were so adamant that January 6th should be such a huge voting issue. Of course, it was not. Illegal immigration and the economy was. But I just couldn't figure out, why are people taking this out of context? No, it was not a great day for our country, but I think there is still a lot more to come out about this day that we don't know, so watch this space. But a lot of people in this country were completely misinformed about that.
I'm fascinated by the potential ramifications on the relationship between the US and the UK. Obviously, Keir Starmer has spent quite a lot of time this year cozying up to Donald Trump. How do you think the Prime Minister feels about this misstep on behalf of the state broadcaster? Do you think he's angry with the BBC, and could he do something about that?
Well, I mean, I don't know the control or not control that the Prime Minister has with regards to the BBC, but we do know there is massive bias against President Trump. I will tell you, as somebody that goes on, a lot of their local radio stations or other things, there's a very clear bias. And that's one thing, if you want to be an opinion show and you want to know that you're like left-leaning or right-leaning. But if you are supposed to be an unbiased show, that's unacceptable, because again, the people it's affecting are the people in the United Kingdom who will not have accurate information. And then, 6 months later, a year later, they come out and they're like, oh, wow, that wasn't real.
Well, Jennifer, do you know what's particularly astonishing for me? It's that edited clip of Donald Trump making that speech. It's almost like an hour later, the two remarks. How has it taken so long for that detail to come out? Obviously, the whistleblowing memo is alerting it to all of us now publicly, and the front page of the Telegraph, that's a pretty good platform to let people know. But it is quite strange that edit was able to take place and people just bought it. Does that maybe suggest a wider problem within the corporation where this sort of representation is just taken at face value without people properly questioning those edits?
100%. That is exactly what it is. And I'll tell you a true story. Last July, not this past July, so a year and a half ago, July, I was doing a radio interview with one of the BBCs, and I brought up the fact of, well, we now know that the Russia collusion was a hoax paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign. And the presenter, I won't mention the name, said, no, Jennifer, that's your conspiracy theory. That's not true. And I said, excuse me, that's not my conspiracy theory. We know that it's happened because Hillary Clinton paid a fine for that. So here we were 2.5 years later after the fine was paid, and the BBC is still fact-checking me incorrectly on this. So yes, these things are allowed to dangle out there, and people don't question them because, again, they think it's the state broadcaster and they're just getting the facts.
I mean, I think there are people who would argue that, and in fact we had one of them on the show a little bit earlier, Roger Bolton, former BBC executive, that, this was someone relatively junior in the organisation who made a mistake. It shouldn't have slipped under the radar. The BBC have almost sort of apologised. If the BBC came out now and issued a proper apology instead of what they've done, which is, saying that the BBC takes on feedback, do you think that would be enough to mollify Donald Trump and potentially repair that perhaps slightly fractured relationship between the US president and our prime minister?
Look, I don't know how much this is going to actually, to answer your question, I don't, because this is not a one-off. If this had not happened over and over against, at the BBC, where it seems very biased against the president, I mean, I tell you that as somebody that goes on there often, then maybe you could say, okay, like you said, it was a junior, it was an editing mistake. But I think this was intentional. And again, why weren't they on, the second after this happened, 3-4 days ago, giving an apology, saying heads will roll, and this is unacceptable. Why is it not this huge correction? Instead, the woman came on and said, in some quarters, this is being discussed.
Okay, Jennifer Ewing, thank you so much for your
Thanks
time
for having me.
this morning. Well, let's go and speak to the associate editor of Labour Uncut, Kevin Maher. Kevin, thank you very much for your time this morning. You've just heard from Jennifer there, I hope, talking about how you've seen this statement from the BBC internally, talking about criticism from some quarters. The White House is quite a large quarter, wouldn't you say?
It is. I mean, this program Trump a Second Chance, as it was titled, was, I think, first broadcast last November, and I was just looking at the reviews of it actually, just before I came on, and I mean, the feature of it seemed to be it was closely following various Donald Trump supporters, trying to understand their politics, their worldview, their mindset, how they arrive at the positions they have. So I suspect this has come as a big shock to BBC executives that it's sailed away for nearly 12 months before there's been this level of controversy attached to it. And I think when you look at the offending clip where this big long speech that Donald Trump made on the 6th of January 2021 in Washington, and as you say, it's 55 minutes apart. They spliced together half a sentence there and half a sentence from 55 minutes later, which is, in broadcasting, in journalism, an absolute no-no. You can't do that. It's completely unprofessional. It's completely unfair, and it becomes completely inaccurate. And the one thing that the BBC has got in its corner, in its stable, if you like, is it's an authoritative voice. And it's these kinds of mistakes, and generously calling it a mistake rather than a politically motivated attack, which others will, and I'm sure that's Jennifer's view. You can't do these things and remain an authoritative voice. And so this is really serious. It goes to the very heart of the BBC's integrity, and its journalism is paramount. In the heart of the BBC, and Panorama, of course, is its premier current affairs programme. So this is a direct hit. And you're right, when you've got the White House press secretary and the President of the United States on the warpath about this is as serious as it gets for the BBC, I think.
Yeah, and I suppose the BBC's defence that it was just someone junior, maybe they will issue an apology at some point soon. I'd just like to raise, though, Martine Croxall, a BBC News anchor, who said on air, she was reading from her autocue, she said pregnant people, and she did a little face and she corrected it to say pregnant women. Now, she has received this week a very big rap on the knuckles from her employers at the BBC. She's been quite seriously disciplined. That seems to stand in pretty stark contrast to this statement that we have from the BBC, not quite apologising, saying that the BBC will take on feedback for splicing together these two clips. Yeah. That does seem pretty extraordinary, doesn't it? Is that an example of sort of two-tier justice within the BBC, perhaps?
It's a double standard. It clearly is a double standard. I mean, all Martine Croxall did was just to correct the language to establish a fact. There are only pregnant women. There are not pregnant people, clearly. So I think that was absolutely fair enough. I think there are 20 complaints. I suspect most of them utterly vexatious. And the BBC kind of jumps and, as you say, raps her across the knuckles for amending the script. And you can't make a big fuss about things like that and not make a big fuss about issues like this. This is really serious, I think. This is a documentary. This is a good documentary. I was watching bits of it before I came. I'm not going to watch the whole thing, but it's an important documentary. It's important that we understand the kind of motivations of your average Trump supporter. That's fair enough. But I think that when you then kind of put aside that impartial lens and then you go for Donald Trump because you don't like Donald Trump, that's how it comes across. You can't do that and be a journalist. You can do that and be a columnist. You can do that and be a commentator. That's fair enough. But you can't do that and be a journalist. And the BBC's journalism are the crown jewels. And this besmirches them.
All right. Associate Editor of Labour Uncut, Kevin Marr, thank you very much for your time this morning.